The South African government identified sorghum as a crop of interest, and in 2019, the Department of Science and Innovation conducted an impact study on sorghum. It's a traditional staple food for many South Africans. But the challenge is that over the years, sorghum consumption has steadily declined. Prior to 2010, we were a net exporter of sorghum, but now we're a net importer. To discuss sorghum in more detail, I'm joined by Wandile Sihlobo from Agbiz. Welcome, Wandile.
Thanks for having me on.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what's resulted in this decline from being a net exporter to a net importer of sorghum and its impact on the South African agricultural value chains?
Yeah, I think, Anli, the sorghum story is really contrary to what we have been seeing in South Africa's agriculture. Because if you take a step back and you look at what's happening in maize and soybeans and all of the other crop, we've been seeing a steady improvement, either on the yields or also within the area planting really holding on reasonably steady. But on the sorghum side, we saw the area is declining, consumption is declining, and the volume of production is declining. And I think a lot on that has to do with more promotion that is needed on the product development, because farmers are planting less of it because of the profitability issues, and they're finding themselves moving to other crops. But how do we then boost profitability? We boost profitability by making sure that there is a solid demand for it, domestically as well as on the export markets. And I think that demand will come once we promote a lot of some of the products that can be developed out of sorghum, but also we speak more about the nutritional side of sorghum, not only focusing on those traditional amabele beer and the other uses that many people are familiar with.
Wandile, it's a bit of a catch-22. The market can't consume more sorghum unless there is more production, but farmers won't produce more sorghum unless there is a demand for it. So how can we encourage farmers to produce more sorghum by ensuring that they're supported?
I mean, I think if you think about sorghum also in the context of climate change, this is a crop that does reasonably better in these harsh climatic conditions. So I do think that there is a scope for planting it from a farmer's perspective. But as long as we can begin then to say, on the consumption point of view, we can do A, B, C, D in as far as the products that can be done for human consumption. And I think that lies both on the retailers, on the food processors and the others and the likes that can develop these products. And I think then once the products are there, promotion of them to the consumers, and speaking a lot also within the health and the benefit on the nutrition on that, because we know that today people are looking for lifestyles that are healthier and they can get all of the nutrients, and I think sorghum does offer that. So it needs to be marketed in that way. And I think all of these can be done in tandem, whereby you are marketing, talking about the product development, but at the same time farmers then are encouraged to plant some of this. And I think with these harsh and the changing climatic conditions, you will find farmers more willing to actually be able to test on some of the areas. Because I mean, let's face it, you go back in the 1980s, we were planting areas that are over 200,000 hectares of sorghum. Unlike today, where we are actually under 100,000 hectares of sorghum, but back then we were twice this area. I think that there's a lot that can still be done.
So it's an ancient grain. We need to market that. We need to create the demand amongst consumers. You're talking about product development, which is very important, creating the seed technology, the stuff that supports sorghum. But what other incentives can government give farmers to mobilize them to actively pursue sorghum?
I think the product development aspect, that lies within the food processors, retailers and the likes. But I think on a government side, there's still an issue to be said about the tax and the VAT that is levied on sorghum. Traditionally in there, because this was a crop that is used on a beer production and the likes. But I think once there is an appreciation that this is now a nutritious crop that can actually be used for food, then the government would have to also remove that so that we can incentivize that production that is there. But I think in that, government is not just going to wake up one day and decide to remove the tax. The industry has to do something about actually talking a little bit more about these nutritious aspects of the sorghum and the food products that can be developed on that. And in turn, look back and say, what do we need in South Africa? We need nutritious food. We have a hunger problem, and sorghum can be planted in all kinds of areas whereby people can be able to benefit from these nutrients. But then for that expansion to happen, the government needs to do A, B, C, D, particularly on this VAT issue. And I do think that that's the message that needs to go out. And the lawmakers, once they understand that message, I think they will be more willing to actually be accepting of it.
And when the agricultural sector lobbies together for a specific cause, we've seen it in various aspects, water, grain, other types of seed technology, the government is receptive to that, right?
I mean, we've had, for example, right now, the issues about the poultry master plan. We've talked about citrus strategy. Why don't we have the sorghum strategy? And I think that's something that there are many industry role players. I know the likes of Grain SA and the others are working on that, but taking it into the national level and emphasizing a lot the nutritious aspect of that. Because, I mean, let's face it, South Africa faces issues of malnutrition, faces rising poverty. And I think sorghum has, in a way of dealing with some of these problems. And I think once that is well understood, but we also then craft the products that can be developed out of sorghum, which consumers can be able to absorb, then the government does its own part by saying, look, on whatever tax that is there, we will be able to remove that, or if anything, put further incentives. That's how we develop some of these things. We've seen examples of government intervention with soybeans, where there were a range of incentives that were put in place, and that led to our soybean industry waking up from producing less than 1 million tons to now over 2 million tons. And I think similar things can happen within the sorghum if it's marketed and it's taught a lot, and then the policy also is responding onto that. And I think beyond the local market, over time, we'll also be looking at the international market to say, can we be exporting any of the sorghum products to other regions? And I think that's part and parcel of the thinking that we have to have, and bring the excitement also about sorghum, not look at it as a backward and an old crop, but it has to be part and parcel of today's discussion.
Absolutely. Some of that returning to our roots, looking at those ancient grains, looking at our own health and nutrition. Sorghum is going to be a big role play in the future, and we're excited to see what happens. Thanks so much, Wandile.
Thank you.